Good day, everyone, and welcome to our 5th edition of our web series, where we focus on the world's top 10 most underreported, countries in the world. The most underreported ones, yet they continue to have, a deep and a very serious number of humanitarian issues, or what I can call humanitarian crises affecting them. So this is another program on suffering in silence, which is brought to you by the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation in collaboration with CARE. And in today's program, we are going to bring you experts, with expertise on Madagascar, expertise on working in humanitarian crises with a focus on Madagascar. And you would ask yourself, why Madagascar? Madagascar is one of those countries with a very beautiful history. Geologists believe that Madagascar initially was just a part of Africa. It then separated 165 million years ago, separated into an island. And unfortunately, that separation has led also to its physical separation, as it is still underreported. And according to the CARE report, it is one of the most underreported countries, and it has been in this top 10 for the past 3 years in succession. So Madagascar is underreported, it is disregarded, it is not making the headlines, it is not making the news in circles where it matters most. Yet, Madagascar is a beautiful country with an amazing flora and fauna, and with more than 90% of its wildlife being unique and sui generis to Madagascar only. Yet, as a world, we disregard such a novel and such a marvelous, country. Besides the beauty, and the exciting and amazing tourism industry in Madagascar, which I have to say has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic as well. Madagascar continues to suffer from a series of natural disasters, from a series of epidemics. And in Africa in general, it is the highest number of cyclones, which means its people every year have to go through the torrid times of having to deal with the cyclones affecting them. The severe impacts of climate change are felt in Madagascar. The protracted and recurrent, drought in Madagascar continue to leave many desperate. And in a population of close to 27 million, about 20 million of Madagascans live below the poverty datum line. Yet Madagascar remains an ostracized nation, remains an underreported nation, which we are convinced there should be more done, to make sure the plight of Madagascan people is actually brought to the fore. But to do that today, we have our guests from Madagascar, who have worked in Madagascar. We actually have Valerie today, Valerie Ceylon, who is the ACF, country director, ACF for Action Contre la Faim, France. She has expertise in emergency preparedness, in disaster management. She has worked all over Africa, under the World Food Programme. She has also worked in Cote d'Ivoire, in Liberia, in Somalia, and her expertise in dealing with humanitarian crisis is going to help us resolve, the Madagascan, crisis today. And also with us today, we have Kasia Rakotove, and Kasia has been with CARE International for more than 10 years. And Kasia is the focal point, of all the communication that has to be done by CARE, which is responsible for also the bigger part of the humanitarian work in Madagascar. She's the communications expert in the CARE in Madagascar, and she's the one who is responsible for channeling information in country and also the communication that needs to be sent beyond Madagascar. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the two fantastic experienced ladies, ladies who have Madagascar at heart, and ladies who help us understand more exactly, what the crisis in Madagascar is and how best it can be resolved. As we progress with our series today, please feel free to make use of our chat function, the Q&A, which you can see clearly there on your screens. Please make use of it. Ask questions, and we will have our experts respond and address some of these things. Our hope is that out of this initiative, we will have one day issues around Madagascar reported in a manner that adequately reflects the crisis that we are dealing with. So for now, let me first bring to the fore Kashiara Kotobe, who is going to take us through, the history around Madagascar. How did we get here? What has been happening all these years? What is the situation like right now in Madagascar? Is there a conflict? And if so, what form of conflict is it? And what exactly is some of the humanitarian, initiatives that they've undertaken, and what are some of the issues that they have observed, and what they ultimately think is the reason why Madagascar is underreported. So I'll invite Katya to take over and address you. Katya, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be one of the speakers to talk about the situation in Madagascar. And as it has been introduced, it is one of the most underreported countries. But good news, you are here this evening, and you will be our ambassadors to make Madagascar known and heard all over the world. You may have heard about this one biggest island in the Indian Ocean, and during the introduction, it is a very nice country. It is a very touristical place, but there are also another aspect of Madagascar that we have to share and to talk to you. First of all, I wanna tell you just a story of Mariela. Mariela is the mother of Princess. Princess, she has called her daughter Princess. When I met her, Princess was 8 months years old, baby, and her mother Mariela lives in the south of the country, and they live on agriculture. Mariela is like most of the families in the south of Madagascar. They struggle to feed the family because they are living in a food insecurity area of the country. The situation is just, she has to keep on producing and working with the lands because even though there are many constraints like not enough rain, very hot, or sandstorm, they have to produce because Mariela wants her baby Princess to be a doctor. The current situation in Madagascar is like 3 consecutive years of drought have dramatically impacted the agriculture production. We have like a projection about 60% of crop loss this season compared to 5-year average. This has been exacerbated by a sandstorm phenomenon ongoing since October 2020, which has contributed to aridity, armyworms, and an outbreak of Rift Valley fever impacting livestock and livelihoods. In terms of figures, it is reported that 1.14 million of people, which represents 43% of people in the south of the country, they are living in food insecurity situation. And if nothing is done, the situation will be worse and worse, as the projection is that October 2021 to May 2022 projection, the number of affected people will increase to 1.3 million people in food insecurity stage. Let's go back quickly to the history. In the south part of Madagascar, it is affected by environmental vulnerability. We are talking about vulnerability because there is the combination of climate change or climate variability. And some of you may have heard about the El Nino phenomenon that began in 2013 and that has caused prolonged disastrous drought in Madagascar. The consequence is that the area, the south of the country, is subject to hot and dry winds, advancing desertification and soil deterioration in the south of the country. So there are at the same time also infestation of locusts, and the production has reduced year by year, and crops are attacked by armyworms and also the crops of maize, rice, or vegetable crops are devastated by those armyworms. Why it is a humanitarian crisis? Because the data is important, as we can read on the reports. Around 27,000 children are affected by malnutrition this year. If we are talking about agriculture, once again, we must say that there are constraints in terms of not enough rains, there are landslides, there are poor conditions for cultivation, whatever the cultivation we wanted to do. There are rains during period when we don't necessarily need rains, and when during planting season there are no rains, and that makes a mess in planting schedules for people. In terms of gender, as we are talking about humanitarian situation, there is an inequality in the south of region, as mainly men are taking the most of the decision, and women, and especially for women-headed households, sometimes they don't have access to resources or to means to produce and to get incomes for the families. So that is quickly what we can share about the situation to make you have the big picture of the situation in Madagascar. What CARE does in the situation? We are assessing the situation, and we are working closely with the government and the civil societies to bring our supports in terms of supporting women and girls for their decision making in the community, in the family, and in the community, for them to be able to take the right decision, and also to make their voices heard in the community level and also in the regional level. That is quickly what I can share, but I'm happy to interact with you along the questions that you will be putting in the Q&A box. Thank you so much. Over.
Oh, thank you very much, Kacha. That was quite a very insightful, presentation, and which clearly captures, the crisis in Madagascar. And yet one wonders why, Madagascar remains underreported. And I think that is one issue that we need to zero in on there. You have pointed out that in Madagascar, the recurrent droughts, you have spoken of the issues of climate change, the issues of the diseases that continuously, affect the population. You even highlighted that 43%, of people in the south of Madagascar, are food insecure, and this number is expected to increase even as we go on into next year. You highlighted issues of environmental vulnerability, and how malnutrition is taking its toll on the young, and also one of the biggest issues that you raised, that the agricultural output continues every year to reduce and to go down. And already it means the number of people that are going to go hungry is going to increase. Valerie, you can come in there and assist us in that regard. Why is it that this crisis, as deep as it is underreported? What is your experience and what is your interpretation also of the situation in Madagascar?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'd like to start with the fact that explaining that in Madagascar, there's a chronic situation. Chronic situation meaning that all year long, there are people who are, you mentioned poverty. So there's a constant poverty issue. There are kids who are chronically undernourished, and that causes stunting. In particular, Madagascar has one of the highest stunting rates in the world, close to 50% throughout the country. So that's year-long a chronic situation, and there's also a chronic situation, particularly in the Great South, because that's the Great South that we're talking about when we talk about the crisis in Madagascar. There's a situation of a lean season where resources are always constrained. There's even a word in Malagasy to say the lean season, kere, referring to the stress that people experience every year during the lean season. So there's a tendency. I took up my job as a regional director 4 years ago, and in the last 4 years, I could see every year quite alarming figures coming back at the same period of time, and no one is really considering the situation because everybody says, oh, it's chronic, it comes back every year. So it's not really a shock. It's not what we call a shock in the humanitarian sector. It doesn't appeal a particular intervention for a particular year, and the humanitarian community will tend to think that people will have coping mechanisms and will restore their livelihoods. What I want to insist is the fact that this year is not a normal kere. It's not a normal chronic situation coming as it has come back in the previous years. It's a lot. It's a crisis. It's a real crisis. And Katia mentioned some of the figures with 60% loss of crops. We also have acute malnutrition, that is wasting. Mainly wasting. So some acute malnutrition rates of 23%. We have very, very high number of people in crisis. We refer to crises with this integrated phase classification, like a standard scale that allows us to compare one country to the other. And indeed, Madagascar this year, the Great South of Madagascar has a very high number of people in crisis in phase 3, 4, or 5, 5 being a famine status. We have a very high number of people in those phases because, for the reasons that were mentioned by Katia. We also have, and also Katia refers to that, a cumulative factor. So the fact that people are, people have depleted their asset through the years. So that's the livelihood assets, but also the water tables have been depleted through the years, and most probably they are not going to to be restored quickly. So we are even going to a worst situation, and it's not likely that anything will improve in the short term or even in the long term, because we can see the effect of climate change. The reason why the crisis is underreported to me is caused to the fact that we're used to, I mean, a key element is that the fact that people are used to a chronic situation in Madagascar and do not react to the fact that it is not a normal crisis. And people tend to get too accustomed, I would say, to a chronic situation because, well, that is Madagascar and that is the way it should happen. No, it's not the way it should happen in the first place, and it's not a normal year. Other reasons are probably that Madagascar is an island, and it's not, I mean, not a lot of countries refer to Madagascar. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, it's not linked to a lot of other countries on the continent, and probably it is a climate crisis. It's not a political crisis, and therefore you don't have a lot of political interactions with superpowers. So indeed, it's less. You know, you hear less of Madagascar in the news. However, I can see an evolution in the last few weeks. I mean, it took us. I mean, we're as SEF Action contre la faim, we're very present in the south of the country with 6 bases and major operations. We've been raising attention on Madagascar since September, so it's been a long time, and we can see a very sharp move in the last, I think, months or the last 2 months, and the media are more attentive to the situation. The donors who are I mean, the foreign, I mean, international community of donors are a lot more receptive. And we can see also that a lot of media would like to access Madagascar. We were contacted by some French media in particular, but there's also the constraint of access to the island, because currently it's not possible to access the country from abroad. There's no flight. The flights have been interrupted in the sense abroad to Madagascar because of COVID-19. That's in a nutshell, and probably been a little bit too long, but that's a little bit my interpretation of the situation, with an evolution coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie, for further emphasizing some of the issues raised by culture there, you know, and you highlight that it is a chronic situation, it is a chronic condition, and maybe that is why it is underreported, because it is considered that life in Madagascar is like that, it has to be like that, so that is why it's failing to attract the attention that it actually requires. Culture. Valerie highlights something very important. You know, on that, she feels that there's been some shift in a few months, and she feels that there's hope that maybe we'll begin to see more issues on Madagascar being reported. You know, kindly share your thoughts in that regard, and also on any other issues that Valerie could have highlighted.
This would be a good news to have Madagascar reported in different channels, and to be heard on to be in, like we would say, the worldwide radar, as even though we are an island in the Indian Ocean, we still exist, and we have like a permanent humanitarian situation that has to be solved in the country. And you know, the more we are heard and we appear in different news and media channels, the more supports and funds we can get for the country, and the more people we can support to get food, to get health facilities, to reinforce education for families in the country. As just to give you an idea, we are like as you gave Patricia, it's more than 80% of population living below poverty line, which is huge for a country. And those people are expecting to have supports to cope with the situation. Over.
Thank you very much, Kacha, in that you for raising, those issues. But my concern now is, from your perspective, other than the climatic, issues that you highlighted, what do you think is also the source, of the problems, of this crisis that we have? What do you think? How did we get here? And Valerie, please, you also come in there, after Kacha is highlighted. What do you think is the source of this problem? Is it purely climatic? What is your take?
First, if you allow me, I would like to correct one point, because it's really important to me. I mean, as I was mentioning, there's a chronic element, but there's also a deteriorating factor, and there's a crisis. There's a real crisis, because in 2020 there've been something like 3 days of rain in the Great South. So there is a crisis, and we don't want to. I mean, while a chronic situation is really important, it's really important also to qualify the situation as a crisis, because it has an impact also on the type of reaction it should prompt. In terms of the source of the situation, well, I mean, there is a climate crisis, of course. There's also the COVID-19 that was a compelling factor, with income sources that have been constrained in 2020 and until now, with movement that have been constrained. There's poverty and all the underlying causes, of course. So there are of course a number of factors, but the cause of the shock of this year and last, I mean, basically 2020 and 2021, in my opinion, is really a natural disaster, with a number of contributing factors also. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. And Kacha, do you share the same thoughts? She says mainly the climate crisis, but also everything has been compounded by the COVID-19, pandemic, which has had a compelling factor. Do you share the same thoughts?
Yeah, I do. The situation in Madagascar is like, as it has been discussed, a permanent situation, and when there is another disaster or another event that comes to add to the situation, that will be worsen and worsen the situation. So we don't need to have more disaster than we have now, as we just need to rebuild what has been affected by disasters. As you, during your introduction, you have talked about a yearly experience of cyclone, and there is also flooding, and even though it's an island, but we experience yearly different hazards during the year. So we cannot say that there is 1 or 2 months as we are safe. Along the year, we can be affected by a hazard, and the last, and as we are all experiencing that pandemic of COVID-19 that is getting the situation worse and worse, and we don't need to have other cyclone or flooding for the next rainy season, because that will even jeopardize all the situation in the country. Over.
Thank you, Kacha, for that. Let me just take this opportunity to just, share with you some of the questions that are coming out, on our chat box. One of the questions, is that, is Madagascar also, having a crisis of refugees, maybe, fleeing to mainland Africa? Is that common? Or they flee elsewhere, or they just stay in Madagascar? Valerie, are you willing to come in there?
I mean, people escaping Madagascar, I'm not aware of that at all. Movements of population, probably, and probably Katia will be able to say more about it because I think she may have more information than me. But people fleeing Madagascar, I'm absolutely not aware of that. And as I mentioned, movement have been very much constrained in the last year and a half. In the country, from the country, so I don't think so.
What we can share is we can say the internal immigration, as people living in the dry region in the south, they are escaping this region and they are migrating to the north of the country. They are using cars, or even they are walking for days to reach the north of Madagascar. Some of them come to the center of the island, and they just want to leave their area to find works, or to search for income opportunities. And people who are living the south, or of working age individuals, to go to urban centers.
Okay,
Over.
so it is more of an internal sort of movement within Madagascar. Okay, no, thank you very much, Kacha. Okay, Valerie, before I proceed.
I would just maybe recommend, since we are talking to a German audience, there's a very nice documentary on Arte that was broadcast a few weeks ago from Gaël Borgia, and about Madagascar and the current situation in the Great South, which shows also those population movements. And I think the images are really striking. I mean, it's still accessible on the Arte TV website, and I think it's really good now. It's very short and very good.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And also, just to take you back on the issue of why Madagascar is underreported, there's a question here on journalistic freedom in the country. Does the media talk about the crisis, the humanitarian crisis? And do they ask for the humanitarian expertise in that regard? Do they? How is the freedom of the press, of the media in Madagascar? Maybe Valerie, you can start in there.
I don't think I'll be able to start. I think there's some kind of national coverage of the crisis, but I'm not in country. I'm based in Paris, and we have a large team based in Madagascar, including in the Great South, but I'm not in country. I'm not able to answer. I'll let Katia do so. Thank you.
Okay, Katia, you can come.
Yeah. Talking about the journalistic freedom in the country, internally, first of all, we have local journalists conducting reports and documentaries in the impacted area, in the food insecurity area, and it is broadcasted in the local media. And as Valerie said, there are also international media reporting crises, reporting aspect in Madagascar outside of the country. Some of them are reporters linked to African media, or even international media. So we can say that there is a freedom, journalistic freedom in the country, but still there are a lot to report, and even for the media to access in the most affected area, it is an issue. As in Madagascar, Valerie introduced about the challenge of accessing rural areas, that needs to have resources, to have means to reach the most affected places, and also for local journalists, it is an investment to conduct the reports. But there are private media that reports internally the crisis. Over.
Thank you very much, Kacha. Interesting, but at least journalists can work in Madagascar. They can do their work mostly, and maybe, as you highlight, issues of access in most of the deeply affected areas. How do you cover, such areas where actually the need for information really is? But then let's proceed again. There's another question on climate change, especially on how Madagascans feel, about climate change. Are they aware of this injustice, especially considering that most of the problems that we have around climate change are actually caused by industrialized nations? Are they aware of this injustice? And is there a similar, program like the Fridays for Future movement, which you find in other African countries like Uganda? Is there something similar like that has to do with climate change and how the people of Madagascar feel about it? I think maybe Kacha, you can come in on that one.
In Madagascar, we are talking about climate change in different levels, I would say. We are in the level of the government. There are initiatives in making plans and also implementing plans in order to face climate change, adaptation plan, and also mitigation plan to cope with that. And in the aspect of the civil society, there are also different initiatives led by different associations and NGOs working in country, and also there are movements led by youth people in terms of advocating to take responsibility and to take measures for Madagascar to be prepared for the climate change, and also to make the voices from Madagascar to be heard as in terms of we are impacted by climate change. There are initiatives led by different groups of young people even in Madagascar, but also in the region of Indian Ocean. Over.
Okay, so the young people are also involved in climate change activities, and they are also pushing to make sure that at least one day, climate change is arrested sort of in Madagascar. No, thank you very much. And that answers one of the questions raised in the audience. But there is also, okay, sorry, Valerie, you can come in as well.
If I may, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say, yes, it's in people's mind, but indeed, it's I think the speed and the scale of the climate crisis is really striking for people. And we have some staff, for instance, when they went, some staff from Madagascar, when they went to the Great South, they were really surprised by the scale of what they could see, especially this year. You could see some landscapes that were completely green a few months before, and we took picture before and after, and the pictures taken in March, where you have a green landscape on the one side, and a few months later it looks like the Sahara, basically completely covered with sand, and especially with the dryness, with the drought, and also with the sandstorms. So it's really, really striking, and I think people do not, at nationwide, may not realize until they see with their own eyes the impact of climate crisis. We are running some I just wanted to say also we're running some projects in the Great South where we sensitize the populations themselves. I mean, the victims of climate crises, we sensitize them to the climate crisis, and we try to promote different ways of different agricultural practices, etc. I mean, so it starts with also a sensitization process. So yes, it's in people's mind, but it has to be more in people's mind because the scale and the speed are very important. Thank you.
So there is more that still needs to be done to make sure that we begin to see a bit of changes around the issues of climate change. But there's one question linked to that is there a man-made, component? Is there, are we as human beings a contributor, to the crisis, especially to the food crisis in Madagascar? And also, if you can also pick it in that regard, how is the central government in this whole regard, its responsibility? Are you satisfied with the approach of the central government in addressing especially the situation in the Great South? So maybe Katja, you can start in that regard, and then Valerie, you can come in.
Well, I'm going to start with the question around the man-made reasons for food crisis in Madagascar. As long as we are talking about aridity and also lack of rains, we have to say also that I has introduced about the climate change situation, that there are less and less forests in Madagascar, and that contributes to climate change, that we don't have enough rains when we need to have rains in the area. There is a lot of perturbation of rains during planting season. We don't have rains, and when we need rains, when we don't after the planting season, we have too much rains sometimes that occurs to flooding, and that the deforestation is we can say can be one of the reasons of the situation in Madagascar.
So
the second question was around,
yes, the central government. Is
okay.
it? Yes.
Yeah. Well, recently, last week, the government has undertook a colloquia to take initiatives to get rid of the situation in the south of the country. There were several projects shared by the government, like establishing pipelines to remedy the problem of drinking water supply in the south, and also to improve agricultural infrastructure, and also there were initiatives from the government to rebuild roads and other health infrastructures in the most drought affected area, which are good initiatives, and we hope that those projects are very well implemented, and the advantages is especially for the people living in the south, as they have reported that more than 2,000 households will get profit from the agricultural products support. So that is good initiative for, we can say that is that comes at a good point to have those initiatives, and we hope that it will be established soon. The sooner the better. Over.
Thank you, Katja. And to you, Valerie, Katja highlights that the government has taken steps to remedy the situation, you know, especially with regards to the agricultural infrastructure, you know, to the health infrastructure? And do you think there's more that the government needs to be doing in this regard?
I'll talk more about the emergency response. I mean, first of all, I totally agree with what Katia was saying, including on deforestation. And maybe I would even add that deforestation is also causing sandstorms. I mean, deforestation is causing greater sandstorms in addition to causing to be a contributing factor of the droughts. In terms of the response to the government, I would like to highlight that the institutions remain the first responders. For instance, as Action contre la faim, we have a range of intervention. I mean, in particular, we're doing nutrition and health intervention. I mean, supporting undernourished people, and especially children, for instance. I mean, we're also doing a lot on water and a lot on food security. I mean, food and cash distribution. But on nutrition and health, we are running 24 mobile clinics in the Great South currently. But we are working hand in hand with the government, and we are referring the most severe cases to government-led, I mean, to public institutions. So I just want to say, and I think Katia was saying the same. I mean, we're not working in isolation. We're really working with the institutions. So in terms of the short-term solutions and the short-term response, I mean, the emergency response, that's what I can say.
Okay, and maybe before you leave the screen, Valerie, there is a question that has to do with the rain management system. Do you think this can be useful in solving the climate change crisis? Valerie?
That's a difficult one, but indeed, I mean, I think we really have to think now all together. We have to think of course, the recovery solutions. I mean, that's part of our normal way to proceed. I mean, we are answering an emergency. I mean, we're addressing a crisis, and we have to look at the recovery. But we also, in that particular crisis, we have to think very long term, and we have to project ourselves in not next year, but in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years time, and think what should be done structurally. And I really think we have to put everything on the table and think out of the box in terms of what should be done, especially in the south of Madagascar, in terms of solutions in the south, in terms of solution maybe in areas where people are moving because of the drought, in terms of the type of culture also. Yes, a lot of things that I think the experts, I mean, experts on climate change also would have to help us. And I don't feel I'm competent enough to address the long-term solutions, the very long-term solutions, frankly. But thank you for asking the question. I think that is the real question.
And Katia, anything to say on this?
Yeah, since I am not a climate change expert, I am not comfortable, as Valerie said, to take a position for this technical question. But what we need in Madagascar is sustainable solution, and also to have those words and those projects to be translated to concrete action, and also sustainable for population, because we need structural solutions for Madagascar, not only like sporadic supports and very few actions, but we need something which has to be sustainable for all the communities.
Thank you, Katia, for highlighting that maybe the things that we need have to be structural, they have to be sustainable, they don't have to be sporadic, processes which have no sustainability or have no bearing in addressing the crisis in Madagascar. But there's one question that has come in there that has to do with the AU, the African Union. Are you aware of any African Union initiatives to mitigate the crisis in Madagascar? Do you think also Africa itself has noted this crisis and has, taken some measures or some steps to make life better for the people in Madagascar? Maybe Valerie, I can put you on the spot there.
You're really putting me on the spot. I have no idea, to be very honest with you. I don't know. I'm not aware of any African Union initiative, but yeah.
Kacha, do you
I'm
say
an operational person. Sorry.
And Kacha, do you say some thoughts?
Yeah, as far as I know, Madagascar participates on different platforms and discussions, and also designing projects and solutions for the country, including that are undertaken in the Africa continent, in terms of scaling up nutrition. For example, we are among those initiatives that is around promoting nutrition for people, for women and girls. And also Madagascar, we several civil societies and the Ministry of Agriculture are part of the initiative around the agricultural Fanarpan, which is like a movement around looking for climate change resilient techniques on agriculture, and that are initiatives that are laid in the Africa region, and Madagascar is part of this discussion. The thing that is we would say specific for Madagascar is, we are a Francophone country, and most of the time when we talk about the Africa continent, one put Madagascar in the Francophone Africa countries, which is on the West Africa, and most of the initiatives that are laid around the thematics of nutrition or agriculture, or like in a zone, in an area, but we are in the east coast of Africa, which is Anglophone. So sometimes one doesn't know where to put exactly Madagascar, in the Francophone country, which is on the west, or in the Anglophone countries, which are in the east coast. So sometimes we have to find the right balance, but we have to say that in terms of region, we have to be in the east, and we have to go out of the language barrier to be to be in the same spot of discussion, court of discussion for the country, and to join the Africa initiative. Over.
Thank you, Kacha. You raised a critical point there. Whether as Madagascar, how do we fit in within the Francophone and also the Anglophone, and that further complicates, the way you are able to, push more for the resolution of the Madagascar crisis in that context. But there's another interesting question here. That isn't also the crisis in Madagascar exacerbated, by the population growth, which here from the audience here, they are saying is from 5 million to 25 million since independence, which is a 2.7% annual increase. Doesn't that have an impact on the food crisis? Kacha, maybe you come in there?
As the questions are going more technical and technical, it's not comfortable for me to provide answers for now for this question around impact on the food crisis. Maybe Valerie can jump in.
Valerie, anything to say there?
I think this is not particular to this is not specific to Madagascar, and indeed in the last few years, I mean, I don't think the demographic factor has been the predominant one. I don't think so. So what would have been the situation should the population growth had been less? I don't know, but it has not been. The population growth hasn't been an important factor in the last few years, for sure.
Okay, maybe quickly, because our time is really moving very fast, just to jump in onto the next question here, that there's a question that what is the situation of refugee movements? And I think we spoke a bit about it, but there's a question on abandoned villages. You know, when people migrate, leaving the south and going to the other parts of Madagascar, you know, where do the refugees tend to? And do they receive any help or any form of support to allow them to settle in their new homes? Kacha, would you want to speak to that?
What we can talk is that the people are leaving the south to go north. And some of them, which is reported on the local media, they are staying in the central of the island. I would like to attract your attention on the effect of that migration on the condition on women and girls or families living during the migration, because they do not always have access to health facilities, to wash facilities, and even talking about households and also incomes during the migration that are challenging for those families living their villages to find incomes in other places in the country.
Thank you very much, Kacha. And we are just left with a few minutes here. And I'm just going to ask you, Valerie and Kacha, what do you think can be done to make sure the crisis in Madagascar is reported on, you know, in an adequate and satisfactory manner that fits, you know, the level of the crisis there? So Valerie, I can start with you, just a few seconds there.
Well, I think, to me, if I may, I mean, to me, reporting is not an objective in itself. I think finding solutions is the objective, and indeed, as you were saying, I mean, the importance is to report adequately the crisis and in a constructive manner. I feel this is coming increasingly, and I can see the response of donor countries, which is one of the objectives of reporting, to be frank. So I see hope there, and we'll do our part to make sure also that the information is available for proper reporting.
And Kacha, one last word there. What can be done?
Yeah, for sure. Report correctly the situation in Madagascar will increase the awareness of what is happening in the country, and that will also, for my personal opinion, will be a pressure, or I would say, and there will be more attention on Madagascar, so that the local initiatives and the projects that are led by local authorities can be led to concrete practical initiatives, and we will have not only words but actions to solve the situation in the south of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kacha and Valerie, for such an exciting debate. And you could see that from the questions from the audience, there was quite interest in understanding more around Madagascar. So thank you so much for your time. And to the audience, you have been very fantastic. You have been very engaging. We appreciate this very much. And on behalf of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation and of CARE, thank you for making time to be with us, to bring to the limelight the most underreported 10 countries in the world. So we will be having our next session on the 28th of June, and the focus will be on Malawi. See you then. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.